Welcome to my channel, Arts and Literature. This video will summarize the second chapter of Born a Crime. Born a Crime is a memoir by Trevor that delves into his upbringing during apartheid in South Africa. The second chapter begins with Trevor describing his mixed-race heritage, born to a black Xhosa mother named Patricia and a white Swiss-German father named Robert. His birth was illegal under apartheid laws which prohibited interracial relationships. Trevor describes how apartheid enforced strict racial segregation, classifying people into rigid racial categories: black, white, colored, and Indian. These classifications determined where people could live, work, and socialize. The government imposed harsh penalties for interracial relationships, deploying police squads to enforce these laws. During apartheid in South Africa, the government made strict rules about people from different races being together. If someone broke these rules, they could go to jail for 5 years. The police had special teams just to watch people and catch them breaking these rules. If they found a couple of different races together, especially if the man was black and the woman was white, the police would be really tough on the black person, sometimes even beating them up and arresting them. But if it was a white man with a black woman, the white man might just get a warning. It was even worse for a black man caught with a white woman; he could end up being charged with rape. Despite severe penalties, including imprisonment for up to 5 years, interracial relationships persisted, underscoring the futility of the apartheid laws. His parents' relationship was a silent rebellion against this system, revealing its fundamental injustice and unsustainability. Trevor's mother, Patricia, played a central role in his life. She was a determined and fearless woman who defied societal norms and apartheid laws. She refused to be confined to traditional roles designated for black women at the time. During apartheid, black men typically worked on farms, in factories, or mines, while black women worked in factories or as maids. My mother defied these norms. She disliked the idea of factory work or being a maid, so she took a secretarial course. This was highly unconventional since black people, especially women, were not expected to occupy white-collar jobs due to apartheid laws. However, in the early 1980s, the South African government made minor reforms in response to international protests, allowing token employment of black workers in low-level white-collar positions. Through an agency, my mother secured a secretarial job at ICI, a pharmaceutical company in Braamfontein, Johannesburg. Living with my grandmother in Soweto, a black township, my mother grew unhappy. At 22, she moved to downtown Johannesburg, despite it being illegal for black people to live there. Apartheid aimed to make South Africa a white country, relegating black people to the Bantustans, semi-sovereign puppet states. Yet, black labor was essential for the economy, so black workers were allowed in townships near white areas, like Soweto. Residence labor status was the only thing keeping them there. Without it, they faced deportation back to the homelands. During apartheid, leaving the township without a pass could land you in jail for 30 days or cost you a hefty fine, nearly half of your monthly salary. My mother, determined never to return home, braved the risks, learning to navigate the city from Xhosa-speaking prostitutes. They taught her how to blend in with maids' overalls and introduced her to foreigners willing to rent flats in town. Despite numerous arrests for not carrying her ID or being in white areas after curfew, she persisted. Settling in Hillbrow, a vibrant neighborhood akin to Greenwich Village, my mom found herself in a diverse, liberal community of expatriates and locals critical of apartheid. She immersed herself in the scene, attending clubs and parties, including the renowned Hillbrow Tower nightclub. Yet, the atmosphere was always tinged with danger. Restaurants and clubs could be shut down, and patrons arrested at any moment. Living among potentially suspicious neighbors, my mom had to constantly navigate the fear of betrayal. My mom's secret flat was in a neighborhood called Hillbrow. She lived in number 203. Down the corridor was a tall, brown-haired, brown-eyed Swiss, German expat named Robert. He lived in 206. Living alone in the city, my mother found solace in the company of a Swiss man down the corridor, Robert. Despite their differences, he was reserved, she was free-spirited, they clicked. They attended underground gatherings and danced at nightclubs together, forming a genuine bond. Their relationship took an unexpected turn when my mother expressed her desire to have a child. Robert, a Catholic who didn't want children, initially refused. She wanted a child on her terms, without a man dictating her life. Despite Robert's initial reluctance, he eventually agreed, though the reasons behind his decision remain a mystery. Their unconventional agreement resulted in my existence, but the intricacies of their relationship and the true extent of their feelings for each other remain unknown to me. On February 20, 1984, my mother, estranged from her family and pregnant by a man she couldn't openly acknowledge, checked into Hillbrow Hospital for a scheduled C-section. Alone in a world that deemed her relationship and her child unlawful, she underwent the procedure. The doctors delivered me, a child whose very existence challenged countless laws and societal norms. As a biracial child born to a black mother and a white father, I was deemed a crime simply by existing. When I entered the world, the doctors were taken aback by my fair complexion. With no man present to claim fatherhood, they inquired about my parentage. My mother, quick on her feet, fabricated a story, claiming that my father hailed from Swaziland, a neighboring country. Despite Lighty's skepticism, the doctors accepted her explanation, understanding the need for categorization under apartheid's rigid rules. In apartheid-era South Africa, every detail, including race and nationality, was meticulously documented on birth certificates. To navigate this oppressive system, my mother lied, stating that I was born in Kanagwane, a homeland designated for Swazi people residing in South Africa. My father was never officially recognized on my birth certificate, fulfilling my mother's expectation of his non-involvement. Upon leaving the hospital, she took me to a new flat in Jubei Park, adjacent to Hillbrow. The following week, when she visited him without the baby, he expressed surprise and asked about me. Though he initially hadn't wanted involvement, my existence prompted him to reconsider. I resided with my mother, and we would discreetly visit my father whenever possible. I became a living symbol of my parents' unlawful relationship, where most children represent their parents' love. My father could only be with me indoors, as any public appearance would risk exposure. Once, as a toddler, I excitedly chased after my father in the park, unaware of the risks. People noticed, causing panic, and my father fled. But I thought it was a game and kept chasing him. Even walking with my mother posed challenges. As a light-skinned child with a black woman, our presence together would draw unwanted scrutiny. Initially, my mother could conceal me when I was a newborn, but as I rapidly grew, it became impossible. I was a noticeably large baby, appearing older than my age, making it impossible to hide in public. Although it was illegal to be of mixed race, being classified as colored, having two parents of mixed race, was not prohibited. So, she presented me as a colored child, moving us around areas where we wouldn't attract suspicion. In a colored neighborhood, she found a daycare for me while she worked. We had a neighbor named Queen, also colored, who would accompany us to the park. In public, Queen acted as if she were my mother, while my actual mother followed a few steps behind, appearing as if she were Queen's maid. I often stayed with my grandmother in Soweto for weeks at a time. Soweto, despite its vibrant community, was meticulously designed for control. It was exclusively for black residents, making it harder to conceal someone who looked like me. The government's presence in Soweto was heavy-handed, with police resembling an occupying force rather than community protectors. Living in Soweto meant being surrounded by a perpetual atmosphere of unrest, with frequent protests and demonstrations needing suppression. Even playing in my grandmother's house, I would often hear the unsettling sounds of gunshots, screams, and tear gas being deployed to quell protests. It was a stark reality of life in the township. Whenever we visited Soweto, my grandmother adamantly kept me indoors. She wouldn't allow me to venture beyond the walls of our yard. While other children played freely in the streets, I could only watch from behind the gate, yearning to join my cousins and neighborhood friends. I pleaded with my grandmother to let me go outside, begging to play with my cousins. However, her refusal stemmed from a deep-seated fear, not of kidnapping by the other children, as I once believed, but of the authorities. In apartheid South Africa, children could be forcibly removed from their families if they were found in the wrong area. My grandmother, keenly aware of the risks, made sure her actions went unnoticed by our neighbor. I was solitary but not lonely, finding solace in books, toys, and imaginary worlds. Even now, I am content in my own company, often lost in thought. Yet, I must remind myself to engage with others, lest I retreat too far into my own mind. Of course, I am not the sole product of a mixed-race union during apartheid. Traveling the world, I encounter fellow South Africans of mixed heritage frequently. With Mandela's election came the promise of freedom, prompting the return of exiles. At around 17, I encountered my first returning exile who shared their story with me. I was stunned to learn that leaving had been an option all along. It felt like discovering parachutes after surviving a fall from an airplane. Unable to comprehend why we had stayed, I confronted my mother. Why didn't we just leave? Why didn't we go to Switzerland? I demanded. Because I am not Swiss. This is my country. Why should I leave? Her steadfastness underscored her deep connection to South Africa. Thanks for watching. Comment down below if you need the summary of Chapter 3. Like, comment and share.